August 15, 1943, 11:45 in the morning. The Texas sun beats down mercilessly on the Henderson farm outside Hereford, where Italian prisoner of war Giuseppe Rossi wipes sweat from his forehead and prepares to return to the detention camp after completing his morning shift harvesting cotton that will support the American war effort against his own country. When farmer Sam Henderson approaches him with words that will challenge everything Giuseppe understands about captivity, enemy status, and the possibilities for human connection. Across the boundaries that separate warring nations, Giuseppe, Henderson says in the slow, careful English that he has been using to communicate with Italian prisoners who work his land through the federal program that provides agricultural labor to replace American workers who have been drafted into military service. My wife Martha has been cooking all morning for Sunday dinner. We've got more food than our family can eat, and it seems wrong to waste it when you boys have been working so hard in this heat. Would you and the other Italians like to join us at our table? Giuseppe stares at Henderson with the kind of disbelief that occurs when reality contradicts every assumption about how prisoners of war should be treated by the citizens of countries they have been fighting against. For 18 months since his capture in North Africa during the Tunisia campaign, Giuseppe has understood his status as enemy alien, whose presence in America represents security threat, requiring constant supervision, controlled movement, and social isolation that prevents inappropriate contact between foreign prisoners and American civilian populations. The invitation to share Sunday dinner with an American farm family violates every protocol that Giuseppe has learned to expect about prisoner-civilian relationships. Enemy soldiers are supposed to remain separated from American communities, confined to detention facilities, supervised during work assignments, and returned to secure compounds where they cannot develop personal relationships that might compromise their status as temporary captives, awaiting repatriation to Italy when the war ends. But Henderson's invitation carries sincerity that transcends institutional barriers between captor and captive. His weathered face shows genuine warmth rather than calculated political motivation. His manner suggests family hospitality rather than propaganda operation. And his tone indicates personal interest in Giuseppe's welfare rather than official compliance with prisoner management policies. Behind Henderson, his wife Martha appears on the farmhouse porch, wiping flour-covered hands on her apron and nodding in agreement with her husband's invitation. Her presence reinforces the genuine family nature of the invitation, while also suggesting that the decision to include Italian prisoners in Sunday dinner has been discussed and approved by the entire Henderson household, rather than representing impulsive individual gesture. Giuseppe's response to the invitation reflects the emotional confusion that occurs when unexpected kindness disrupts psychological adaptation to systematic dehumanization. His 18 months of captivity have taught him to expect courteous but distant treatment from American personnel who maintain professional relationships with prisoners while avoiding personal connections that might complicate institutional boundaries between enemy and ally, foreign and domestic, temporary and permanent. In war, prisoners expect walls and guards. Military detention systems are designed to maintain clear boundaries between captors and captives, to prevent personal relationships that might compromise security, and to ensure that enemy personnel remain isolated from civilian populations who might be vulnerable to espionage, sabotage, or ideological influence that could undermine domestic support for military operations. But sometimes, prisoners find open doors and welcoming tables. Sometimes, civilian communities choose to recognize shared humanity that transcends national boundaries and military classifications. Sometimes, the family hospitality that represents fundamental American values becomes more important than institutional barriers that separate enemy prisoners from the communities where they work and live during extended captivity periods. The Italian prisoner of war program in the United States had been operating since 1943, when large numbers of Italian soldiers captured in North Africa were transported to detention facilities throughout the American interior, where they could be housed safely while providing agricultural and industrial labor that supported the war effort, while American workers served in military forces overseas. Giuseppe's assignment to agricultural work in Texas reflected federal policies that sought to address labor shortages in farming communities, while providing productive activity for Italian prisoners whose extended captivity would otherwise require enormous resources for maintenance and supervision without contributing to American economic or military objectives. The Henderson Farms' participation in the prisoner labor program represented common practice among agricultural communities throughout Texas and other states where labor shortages threatened crop production that was essential for both domestic food supply and military logistics that supported American forces fighting in Europe and the Pacific. Giuseppe's background included childhood on a small farm in Tuscany, where family meals represented central social institution that connected multiple generations through shared food preparation, storytelling, and maintenance of cultural traditions that had survived political changes, economic hardships, and social transformations that had affected Italian rural communities for centuries. The invitation to join an American family dinner created opportunity for Giuseppe to experience familiar social patterns that reminded him of home while also introducing him to American family traditions that paralleled Italian customs of hospitality, community gathering, and intergenerational connection through shared meals and cultural exchange. Henderson's decision to invite Italian prisoners reflected his practical recognition that the men working his farm were individuals with families, cultural traditions, and personal histories, rather than simply anonymous enemy personnel whose presence served American labor needs while maintaining appropriate social distance from civilian communities. Do you think Henderson's invitation to Italian prisoners reflected genuine Christian hospitality, or do you think it reflected practical calculation about improving prisoner morale and work performance through personal attention that served his agricultural interests? Do you think prisoner-civilian relationships could remain purely humanitarian, or did they inevitably acquire political significance that affected broader community attitudes toward enemy personnel and American war policies? Giuseppe's acceptance of Henderson's invitation required him to overcome psychological barriers that 18 months of captivity had created between his identity as Italian soldier and his recognition as individual human being worthy of family inclusion and personal respect from American civilians who had every reason to view him as representative of enemy nation that had supported German aggression. The walk from the cotton fields to the Henderson farmhouse represented geographical transition from workspace to family space, from institutional relationship to personal relationship, from prisoner status to guest status that challenged both Giuseppe's expectations about American civilian attitudes and the Henderson family's assumptions about appropriate boundaries between captors and captives. Martha Henderson's preparation for Sunday dinner had included cooking quantities of food that reflected her intention to feed not just her immediate family, but also the Italian prisoners who had been working their land for 3 months with competence and courtesy that had gradually transformed institutional labor arrangements into personal relationships based on mutual respect and cultural curiosity. The dining room where Giuseppe and 3 other Italian prisoners joined the Henderson family contained religious symbols, family photographs, and cultural artifacts that represented American rural traditions, while also displaying openness to cultural exchange that welcomed foreign guests despite their official status as enemy personnel. The meal itself included traditional American Sunday dinner foods: roast beef, mashed potatoes, green beans from the family garden, cornbread that Martha had baked that morning, and apple pie made from fruit grown on Henderson family trees. The abundance of food contrasted dramatically with prison camp rations that met nutritional requirements without providing the psychological satisfaction that comes from family-style meal preparation and presentation. But the conversation that accompanied the meal created even more significant contrast with institutional dining that occurred in prison camp mess halls, where prisoners ate quickly while maintaining social distance that prevented personal relationships or cultural exchange that might complicate their status as temporary captives awaiting repatriation. Giuseppe's limited English vocabulary expanded during dinner conversation as Henderson family members encouraged him to describe his family background, his pre-war occupation as farmer in Tuscany, and his hopes for reunion with wife and children who remained in Italy while he served indefinite captivity in Texas until American and Italian governments negotiated prisoner exchange or repatriation agreements. The Henderson children, ages 8 and 12, displayed fascination with Italian language and culture that led Giuseppe to teach them basic Italian phrases, while learning American colloquialisms and cultural references that helped him understand the family dynamics and community values that shaped rural Texas social relationships. Sam Henderson's questions about Italian agricultural techniques led to technical discussions about crop rotation, soil management, and farming methods that revealed shared professional interests that transcended national boundaries and enemy classifications to create common ground based on agricultural expertise and mutual respect for farming knowledge. Martha Henderson's interest in Italian cooking techniques resulted in Giuseppe's offer to prepare pasta dish using ingredients available in American kitchen, creating collaborative cooking experience that demonstrated cultural exchange through food preparation that honored both Italian traditions and American hospitality customs. The other Italian prisoners who joined the Sunday dinner, Carlo from Sicily, Antonio from Naples, and Franco from Milan, contributed their own stories, cooking knowledge, and cultural perspectives that enriched the conversation while demonstrating the regional diversity that characterized Italian identity beyond simple national classification. The family prayers that preceded the meal included acknowledgments of gratitude for safe harvest, appreciation for guest presence, and requests for protection of all family members, including our Italian friends who are far from their own families. The spiritual inclusion of prisoners in family prayer demonstrated religious hospitality that transcended national boundaries. As the afternoon continued, the Sunday dinner evolved into informal cultural festival that included sharing of photographs from Italy, discussion of agricultural practices that reflected different climate and soil conditions, and exchange of family stories that revealed universal experiences of love, loss, hope, and commitment that connected Italian and American families despite wartime separation. Giuseppe found himself crying during conversation about his children in Italy, not from sadness about separation, but from gratitude for American family that had chosen to include him in their most intimate social institution, despite his official status as enemy prisoner whose presence represented potential security threat to their community. The emotional response reflected psychological healing that occurred when systematic dehumanization was interrupted by genuine human recognition, when institutional barriers were transcended by family inclusion, when enemy status was temporarily forgotten in favor of individual dignity and cultural respect. The Henderson family's response to Giuseppe's tears demonstrated understanding that his emotional expression reflected gratitude rather than manipulation, homesickness rather than political calculation, and human connection rather than inappropriate boundary violation that might compromise prisoner-civilian relationships. The afternoon concluded with Giuseppe and the other Italian prisoners helping with kitchen cleanup, contributing to household chores that reflected family membership rather than prisoner labor, participating in domestic activities that honored their hosts while demonstrating their own cultural values about guest behavior and family contribution. Henderson's invitation for the Italian prisoners to return for Sunday dinner the following week established a pattern of regular family inclusion that would continue throughout their agricultural assignment, creating ongoing relationship that transcended temporary wartime circumstances to develop into lasting friendship based on mutual respect and cultural appreciation. The weekly Sunday dinners became community institution that other farming families began adopting, creating network of prisoner-civilian relationships that demonstrated possibilities for international friendship that transcended wartime hostilities while maintaining appropriate boundaries that respected both security requirements and human dignity. Giuseppe's letters home to his family in Italy included descriptions of American family hospitality that challenged Italian assumptions about American civilian attitudes toward enemy prisoners, contributing to more complex understanding of American culture and values that went beyond wartime propaganda representations. After the war ended and Italian prisoners were repatriated, Giuseppe maintained correspondence with the Henderson family that eventually led to his return to Texas as immigrant rather than prisoner, settling permanently in community, where he had first experienced American hospitality and family inclusion. The Henderson farm became gathering place for Italian-American community that developed from wartime prisoner relationships, creating cultural institution that honored both Italian heritage and American values through ongoing family connections that transcended their origins in prisoner labor arrangements. Giuseppe's children, born in Texas after his immigration, grew up bilingual and bicultural, maintaining connections to Italian traditions while participating fully in American community life that had welcomed their father during his transformation from enemy prisoner to family friend to permanent community member. The story of Italian prisoners sharing Sunday dinners with Texas farm families became part of local community history that demonstrated possibilities for international friendship that could emerge from wartime circumstances when civilian populations chose hospitality over hostility, inclusion over exclusion, human recognition over enemy classification. In the end, the tears that Giuseppe shed at the Henderson family dinner table represented recognition that humanity could transcend institutional boundaries, that family could extend beyond national classifications, that enemy status could be transformed into friendship through genuine hospitality that served both practical and spiritual needs of people separated by war but united by common values. The Sunday dinners that began as simple family hospitality became evidence that civilian communities could choose to build bridges rather than walls, to create connections rather than maintain separations, to recognize shared humanity rather than emphasize national differences during circumstances that seem to require mutual hostility. If stories like this make you think about the hospitality we extend to strangers, about the family boundaries that can expand to include people from different backgrounds, about the Sunday dinner tables that become places of healing rather than simply places of eating, then perhaps you understand why some prisoners find more than walls and guards, why some families discover that enemy status dissolves in the presence of genuine welcome, and why the most important victories sometimes involve expanding our definition of family to include people who begin as strangers but become lifelong friends through the simple act of sharing a meal.